Excuse me, you're in the wrong section. Coach is that way. Flight attendant Jessica Martinez pointed dismissively toward the back of Delta Flight 447, her tone dripping with condescension. She deliberately stepped between Terrence and the first-class seats, blocking his path like a human barrier. Terrence Williams stood in the aisle, boarding pass in hand, briefcase at his side. He hadn't even attempted to sit down. This section is for our premium passengers only. Jessica stepped directly into his path, arms crossed, speaking loud enough for nearby passengers to crane their necks.
I don't have all day for this.
A woman in 3B pulled out her phone. Someone whispered,
Here we go again.
Terrence's calm brown eyes met Jessica's glare. Ma'am, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. Back of the plane. Move. The cabin fell silent except for the soft click of recording phones. Have you ever watched someone judge you before knowing who you really are? Flight departure, 12 minutes. The overhead announcement crackled through the cabin as passengers settled into their seats. Terrence Williams remained standing in the aisle. His leather briefcase held steady despite the growing attention. Ma'am, if you could just check my boarding pass, he began, his voice measured and professional. Jessica cut him off with a sharp gesture. I don't need to check anything. You clearly don't understand how airline seating works. She turned to nearby passengers with an exaggerated eye roll. Some people think they can just walk onto a plane and sit anywhere. A woman in seat 2C started recording on her phone. The screen showed live in red letters. Her whispered commentary carried through the cabin. Y'all seeing this discrimination right now? Flight attendant won't even look at this man's ticket. The live stream counter showed 47 viewers, then 89, climbing steadily. Flight departure, 10 minutes. Supervisor Mark Thompson approached from the galley, his crisp uniform and authoritative stride drawing more attention. At 6'2", with graying temples, he embodied airline hierarchy. His practiced smile didn't reach his eyes as he assessed the situation. What seems to be the problem here? Mark's tone suggested he'd already chosen sides. Jessica straightened, energized by backup. This passenger is trying to sit in first class without proper documentation. I've explained our policies, but he's refusing to comply. Mark nodded knowingly, not even glancing at Terrence. Sir, I'm going to need you to cooperate with our crew. We have procedures for a reason. Terrence's phone buzzed against his palm. The screen lit up with messages in French, Spanish, and Arabic. He silenced it without looking, maintaining eye contact with Mark. I understand procedures completely, Terrence replied. Perhaps we should follow them correctly. The live streaming passenger zoomed in on Terrence's calm demeanor. Her viewer count hit 156. Comments flooded the feed. Stay strong, brother, and this is disgusting, mixed with uglier sentiments. Flight departure, 8 minutes. Security guard. Dave Rodriguez appeared at the aircraft door, radio crackling on his belt. His presence shifted the energy immediately. Passengers who'd been subtly recording now held their phones openly. Jessica's confidence grew. Finally, Dave, this passenger is disrupting our boarding process and refusing to move to his assigned section. Dave's hand rested on his radio. Sir, we're going to need you to step aside so we can resolve this situation quickly. Terrence shifted his briefcase to his left hand, revealing a glimpse of an official seal on his leather portfolio. The gold emblem caught the cabin light for just a moment before disappearing again. I'm happy to resolve this, Terrence said. I suggest we start by examining the facts. Mark stepped closer, his voice dropping to what he thought was a reasonable tone. Look, I get it. Sometimes people make mistakes with bookings, but we can't hold up an entire flight because of confusion about seat assignments. The live stream viewer count reached 284. A passenger in row 4 had started her own recording. Someone near the back shouted, "Just let the man show his ticket!" Jessica whirled around. Everyone needs to mind their own business. This is a crew matter. Flight departure, 6 minutes. The tension thickened as more passengers pulled out phones. The overhead bins clicked shut with finality. Flight attendants in economy looked toward first class with concern. Terrence's phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID showed UN headquarters, urgent. He declined the call without hesitation, his focus remaining on the crew surrounding him. "Gentlemen, lady," Terrence addressed the group with diplomatic calm. "I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about my seating arrangement." Dave's radio squawked. "Gate 27, status report on boarding delay." "Copy that," Dave responded, eyeing Terrence. "We're handling a passenger compliance issue." Mark crossed his arms. "Sir, we have witnesses here who can confirm you were asked politely to move to your proper seat. We've been more than patient." The live stream comments were flying. "Document everything," and "call the news," and "airline discrimination caught on camera." The viewer count hit 447. Jessica tapped her watch. "We're going to miss our departure slot because of this nonsense." A businessman in 1A looked up from his laptop. "Maybe someone should actually check his boarding pass before we all get delayed." Jessica shot him a sharp look. "Sir, crew members are trained to identify passengers who don't belong in premium cabins." The words hung in the air like smoke. Several passengers exchanged glances. The live streaming woman shook her head, muttering, "Did she really just say that?" Flight departure, 4 minutes. Terrence's portfolio rested against his leg, diplomatic seals barely visible. His posture remained relaxed, despite being surrounded by 4 airline employees. His dark suit was impeccably tailored, his shoes Italian leather, his demeanor unshakable. "I appreciate everyone's concern about procedures," he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to much larger stages. "Shall we follow them properly?" Mark's patience was visibly wearing thin. "Sir, you're holding up 247 passengers. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." The live stream reached 592 viewers. A flight attendant from economy approached cautiously. "Mark, maybe we should just—" "Handle your section, Linda," Mark snapped. "We've got this under control." But control was exactly what was slipping away. The cabin buzzed with whispered conversations. Phones recorded from multiple angles. Social media notifications pinged throughout the aircraft. Terrence stood at the center of it all, a study in composed dignity facing a storm of assumptions. The stage was set for something none of them could have anticipated. Flight departure, 3 minutes. Captain Sarah Mitchell emerged from the cockpit, her 4 gold stripes commanding immediate attention. 22 years of flying experience had taught her to read situations quickly. The cluster of crew members and security around one passenger told her everything she needed to know. Or so she thought. "What's the situation here?" Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd landed planes in thunderstorms and handled mid-air emergencies. Mark straightened like a soldier reporting to a general. "Captain, we have a passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions. He's claiming his seat assignment is first class, but clearly doesn't have proper documentation." Sarah's eyes swept over Terrence, taking in his professional appearance, his calm posture, the expensive briefcase. Something felt off about Mark's assessment, but she'd learned to trust her crew's judgment. "Sir, I'm Captain Mitchell. I need you to cooperate with my crew so we can depart on schedule." The live stream viewer count hit 847. Comments flooded faster than anyone could read. "Captain's here now. This is about to get real. Why won't they just check his ticket?" Terrence inclined his head respectfully toward the captain. "Captain Mitchell, I appreciate your intervention. I believe a simple verification of my boarding credentials would resolve this matter efficiently." Sarah noticed his precise diction, his diplomatic phrasing. This wasn't how disruptive passengers typically spoke, but Mark and Jessica stood behind her with unified certainty. "Sometimes verification isn't the issue," Sarah said carefully. "Sometimes it's about understanding airline policies and passenger responsibilities." Flight departure, 2 minutes. The cabin's energy shifted dramatically. Passengers who'd been filming discreetly now held phones openly. Someone in the economy had started their own live stream. The original stream reached 200 viewers. A passenger in 2B called out, "Just let him show his boarding pass." Jessica whirled around. "Sir, interfering with crew duties is a federal offense." "So is discrimination," shot back a woman from row 3. Dave's radio crackled urgently. "Gate 27, you're approaching departure deadline. Status?" 2 minutes to resolution, Dave responded, his hand moving closer to his radio controls. The pressure was building from multiple directions. Ground control needed the gate. Passengers demanded answers. Social media amplified every moment. Mark leaned toward the captain. "Sarah, we've been more than patient. He's had multiple opportunities to produce proper documentation." "I haven't been asked to produce anything," Terrence interjected quietly. "Every request has been interrupted or dismissed." His phone buzzed again. This time he glanced at the screen. "Secretary General, immediate." He declined the call and returned his attention to the captain. Sarah caught the glimpse of the caller ID. Her expression shifted slightly. "Flight departure, 1 minute." "All right, everyone take a breath," Sarah commanded. "Sir, please show me your boarding pass." Finally, Terrence reached into his jacket pocket. "Slowly," Dave warned, his security training kicking in. The entire cabin held its breath. Phones zoomed in. The live stream spiked to 1,856 viewers. Terrence produced his boarding pass with deliberate calm. As he handed it to Captain Mitchell, a corner of his diplomatic passport became visible in his jacket pocket. The distinctive blue cover with gold lettering was unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. Sarah examined the boarding pass. Her face went pale. "Seat 2A, first class, diplomatic service booking." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Mark snatched the boarding pass from Sarah's hands. "This could be fake. Anyone can print airline boarding passes." "Are you suggesting I've committed federal fraud?" Terrence's voice remained calm, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Jessica doubled down. "We see fake documents all the time. People will do anything to get upgraded." The live stream exploded. Comments poured in. "Did they just accuse him of fraud? This is insane. Sue them all. Gate closure, now." Dave's radio erupted with urgent chatter. "Gate 27, immediate departure required. Traffic control is waiting." The pressure reached a breaking point. Sarah felt the weight of 247 passengers, airline schedules, and now a potential discrimination lawsuit. "Sir, I'm going to need to see additional identification to verify this booking," she decided. "Additional identification?" Terrence repeated. "Am I the only passenger being subjected to this enhanced verification process?" Sarah looked around the cabin. Every other first-class passenger sat comfortably in their seats. No one else had been asked for additional documentation. "Well, no, but then on what legal basis are you applying different standards to my boarding credentials?" The question hung in the air like a bomb with a lit fuse. Mark stepped forward aggressively. "Sir, you're creating a disturbance that's affecting the entire flight. We have the right to remove disruptive passengers." "Define disruptive," Terrence challenged. "I've remained calm, answered every question, and complied with every reasonable request. The disruption appears to be coming from crew members who refuse to follow standard verification procedures." The live stream hit 2,340 viewers. Someone had tagged local news stations. A passenger tweeted the video with #airline discrimination. Dave received another urgent radio call. "Gate 27, you're now 15 minutes past departure. Explain delay." "Passenger compliance issue," Dave reported through gritted teeth. The point of no return. A flight attendant from coach hurried forward. "Captain, we're getting questions from passengers about the delay. Some people are asking if this is racial profiling." The words no airline employee wants to hear. Jessica's face flushed red. "This has nothing to do with race. This is about policies and procedures." "Then follow them," said the businessman in 1A, looking up from his laptop. "Check his ID, verify his seat, and let's fly." Mark's authority was crumbling. "We don't need passengers telling us how to do our jobs." "You need someone too," muttered a woman from row 4. The tension ratcheted higher as more passengers voiced support for Terrence. Someone in economy shouted, "Let the man sit down!" Another passenger called out, "This is embarrassing!" Mark's face darkened. "Security, I need backup to gate 27. We may need to remove a passenger." The threat escalated everything. Multiple phones captured Dave's hand moving to his radio. The live stream comments erupted. "They're calling more security. This is getting scary. Document everything." Terrence's portfolio shifted slightly against his leg. The diplomatic seal caught the light again, but this time Captain Mitchell noticed it. Her eyes narrowed as she tried to make out the emblem. "Sir, that briefcase. What organization do you work for?" Before Terrence could answer, Jessica interrupted. "Captain, we don't have time for 20 questions. This passenger needs to comply or be removed." Dave's radio crackled with response. "Additional security en route to gate 27. The cabin buzzed with nervous energy. Passengers exchanged worried glances. The live stream viewer count climbed past 3,000. Local news notifications started pinging on phones throughout the aircraft. Captain Mitchell stood at the crossroads of her career, surrounded by a crew that had created an international incident and a passenger who remained mysteriously calm despite facing removal. She was about to make a decision that would change everything. But she had no idea just how much was about to change. The silent, crushing action Terrence Williams had heard enough. With movements as deliberate as a chess grandmaster, he opened his leather portfolio. The soft click of quality hardware echoed through the hushed cabin. Every phone camera zoomed in. Every passenger leaned forward. He withdrew a navy blue booklet with gold embossing that caught the overhead lights. The diplomatic passport landed softly on Captain Mitchell's clipboard with the weight of international law behind it. The cover read, "United Nations, Diplomatic Passport." The cabin fell into absolute silence. Mark's face drained of color like water from a broken dam. Jessica took an involuntary step backward, her confident posture crumbling. Dave's hand froze on his radio mid-transmission. Captain Mitchell stared at the document as if it were radioactive. "Dr. Terrence Williams," Terrence said quietly, his voice carrying new authority. "Chair of the United Nations Human Rights Aviation Committee." The live stream exploded. Comments flooded the feed faster than the system could process. "Holy shit! UN Diplomat. They're so screwed. This is insane." The viewer count spiked past 5,600 in seconds. The antagonist. Freeze moment. Jessica's mouth opened and closed without sound. Her hands trembled as the full magnitude of what she'd done crashed over her. She'd publicly humiliated a United Nations diplomat. On camera, with thousands watching. Mark stepped backward, bumping into a passenger's armrest. His supervisor's confidence evaporated like morning mist. 23 years of airline management experience hadn't prepared him for this moment. Dave's radio squawked urgently. "Additional security ETA 2 minutes." He fumbled to cancel the request, his training manual having never covered accidentally discriminating against international diplomats. Captain Mitchell's hands shook slightly as she opened the diplomatic passport. Her eyes scanned the official seals, the multiple visas, the diplomatic immunity clauses printed in English, French, Spanish, Arabic, and Chinese. This was real. This was catastrophically real. "Dr. Williams," Sarah's voice cracked slightly. I sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding." Misunderstanding? Terrence's eyebrow arched with surgical precision. "Captain, let's be accurate about what occurred here. Your crew made assumptions based on my appearance, refused to verify my credentials, accused me of fraud, and called security to have me removed from a flight I'm legally entitled to board." The live stream viewer count hit 7,200. Someone had shared it on Twitter with hashtag diplomatic discrimination. The hashtag was already trending. A passenger in 4C whispered to his wife, "I can't believe what we're witnessing." She nodded, still recording. "This is going to be everywhere." The hidden final secret. But Terrence wasn't finished. He reached into his portfolio again and withdrew an official letter bearing the seal of the United Nations Secretary General. The letterhead alone commanded respect in 193 countries. He placed it beside his passport on Captain Mitchell's clipboard. "This letter," Terrence said with quiet authority, "requests my immediate presence at tomorrow's emergency session addressing systemic discrimination in international aviation. I'm scheduled to present our committee's findings on airline bias incidents to representatives from 47 nations." Sarah's eyes widened as she read the letterhead. Her career flashed before her eyes. "The session," Terrence continued, "will determine whether the UN recommends sanctions against airlines with documented discrimination patterns." Mark made a choking sound. Jessica grabbed the back of a seat for support. The businessman in 1A looked up from his laptop, eyes wide. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "They picked the wrong guy to mess with." Several passengers in economy were craning their necks, trying to see what was happening. Word was spreading through whispered conversations. UN diplomat, discrimination. This is bad. "Dr. Williams," Captain Mitchell whispered, "what can we do to make this right?" The question hung in the air like incense in a cathedral. The live stream eruption. The original live stream had reached 12,000 viewers. 3 separate passengers were now broadcasting. Someone had called CNN. Local news vans were reportedly heading to the airport. Comments poured in from around the world. Diplomat schooling, racist airline crew. "This is why I don't fly Delta." "Get them Dr. Williams." "International incident right here." "Someone's getting fired." "This man just destroyed their careers." A passenger in row 6 shouted, "You better apologize right now." Others joined in. "Disgusting behavior." "Fire them all." "This is embarrassing." The cabin had transformed into a court of public opinion, and the verdict was unanimous. Jessica finally found her voice, though it came out as a desperate whisper. "I didn't know. We didn't realize." "What didn't you realize?" Terrence asked with diplomatic precision. "That I deserved basic respect as a paying passenger? That my boarding credentials should have been verified before accusations were made? Do assumptions based on appearance violate both airline policy and federal law?" Each question landed like a judicial gavel. Mark tried to interject. "Dr. Williams, we were just following standard procedures," Terrence interrupted smoothly. "Show me the standard procedure that requires additional verification from black passengers in first class. Show me the policy manual that authorizes crew members to refuse document verification based on appearance." The silence was deafening. The phone calls resume. Terrence's phone buzzed again. This time he answered. "Dr. Williams speaking." His voice carried across the silent cabin as he switched to the speakerphone. "Terrence, this is Secretary General Chen. We've been trying to reach you. The Aviation Discrimination Committee is concerned about your delayed arrival." Every person in first class could hear the conversation. Several passengers held their breath. "Mr. Secretary General, I'm currently experiencing the very discrimination we'll be discussing tomorrow. I'm aboard Delta Flight 447, where crew members have spent the last 20 minutes questioning my right to occupy the first-class seat I legally purchased." Silence from the phone. Then, "Are you saying this incident is occurring in real time?" "With multiple witnesses and live-stream documentation, yes, sir." "Dr. Williams, please document everything. This may become our primary case study for tomorrow's presentation." Jessica's legs nearly gave out. Mark gripped the nearest seat back. "I'll ensure complete documentation, Mr. Secretary General." The incident has been broadcast live to over 12,000 viewers and is trending globally. Excellent. This real-time evidence will be invaluable for our sanctions recommendations. Safe travels, Terrence. The call ended. The cabin remained frozen in mortified silence. The corporate awakening. Captain Mitchell's radio crackled with a new voice, higher up the chain than ground control. Flight 447, this is Operations Manager Patricia Hayes. We're aware of a situation involving a diplomatic passenger. Status report immediately. Sarah keyed her radio with trembling fingers. Operations, we have a significant situation requiring immediate corporate intervention. Define significance. Sarah looked at Terrence, then at her crew, then at the dozens of phones recording every word. We have a United Nations diplomat who was questioned about his first-class boarding credentials. The incident has been live-streamed to thousands of viewers and is trending on social media. The silence from operations stretched longer than a transatlantic flight. Finally, Flight 447, do not, repeat, do not allow that aircraft to move until corporate counsel arrives. Dr. Williams, if you can hear this transmission, Delta Airlines offers our sincere apologies and requests the opportunity to address this matter appropriately. Passengers throughout the cabin heard the transmission. Someone in the economy called out, "Too late for apologies!" The power shift. The dynamic had completely reversed. Crew members who'd surrounded Terrence with authority now looked like defendants awaiting sentencing. Passengers who'd watched in horror now applauded openly. Mark stepped forward, his voice barely audible. "Dr. Williams, I take full responsibility for this incident. My crew was following my lead." "Your crew," Terrence replied calmly, "was following their biases. You were simply enabling them." The live stream comments were brutal. "Accountability time. Watch them scramble. Career over. This is justice." Jessica burst into tears. The magnitude of her actions, captured on video, witnessed by thousands, involving an international diplomat, crashed over her like a tsunami. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "What exactly didn't you mean?" Terrence asked, his voice remaining level. "You didn't mean to assume I didn't belong in first class? You didn't mean to refuse to check my boarding pass? You didn't mean to accuse me of fraud? You didn't mean to call security to have me removed?" Each question stripped away another layer of Jessica's defenses. A passenger in 3B shook her head. "This is painful to watch. How do you not see someone's boarding pass before making assumptions?" "Because intent and impact are very different things," Terrence continued, addressing Jessica directly. "And the impact of your actions is now being documented for a United Nations committee charged with investigating exactly this type of discrimination." Dave finally spoke up. "Sir, what can we do? How do we fix this?" Terrence looked at each of them, Mark with his crumbling authority, Jessica with her tear-streaked face, Dave with his confused helplessness, Captain Mitchell with her growing horror at the situation. "You fix this," he said quietly, "by ensuring it never happens to anyone else." The live stream had reached 18,000 viewers. Diplomatic discrimination was trending in 12 countries. News outlets were picking up the story. Corporate executives were making emergency calls. And in the center of it all sat Dr. Terrence Williams, a man who'd been publicly humiliated 20 minutes earlier and was now quietly orchestrating one of the most documented discrimination cases in aviation history. The real power had been revealed, and it was devastating. The emergency response. Within 8 minutes, Delta's crisis management protocol activated like a military operation. Corporate executives pulled from board meetings, legal teams summoned from lunch breaks, PR specialists canceled afternoon appointments. The live stream counter hit 24,000 viewers. Hashtag diplomatic discrimination trended in 18 countries. CNN had picked up the story. The UN's official Twitter account retweeted the incident with a statement. Investigating reported discrimination against our Aviation Rights Committee chair. Captain Mitchell's radio crackled again. This time, the voice carried the weight of corporate desperation. Flight 447, this is CEO Michael Richardson. Dr. Williams, if you're listening, I'm personally overseeing our response to this unacceptable situation. The cabin fell silent. Passengers exchanged glances. The CEO himself was intervening. Terrence leaned toward the captain's radio. Mr.
Richardson, this is Dr. Williams. I appreciate your direct involvement. Dr. Williams, I'm en route to the airport with our legal counsel and diversity officer. We need to address this immediately and appropriately. A passenger in 3C whispered, "The CEO is coming here?" Her husband nodded grimly. That's how bad this is. The live stream comments were flying. CEO in crisis mode. This is huge. Damage control time. Too little, too late. The data weapon Terrence opened his portfolio once more. This time he withdrew a thick folder marked Confidential UN Aviation Discrimination Study. Mr. Richardson, since you're listening, perhaps this is an opportune moment to discuss some relevant statistics. He opened the folder, revealing charts, graphs, and detailed analysis. Several passengers craned their necks to see. The woman recording the live stream zoomed in on the documents. Our committee has documented 1,247 discrimination incidents across major U.S. airlines in the past 18 months. Delta Airlines accounts for 312 of these cases, approximately 25% of all reported incidents. Jessica's face went white. Mark gripped the seat back harder. A passenger gasped audibly. Furthermore, Terrence continued, his voice carrying the authority of irrefutable data, African-American passengers in first-class cabins are questioned about their credentials at a rate 340% higher than white passengers with identical bookings. The numbers hit like precision strikes. The live stream comments exploded. 340%? The data doesn't lie. This is systematic. Receipts. Of particular note, Terrence added, is Delta's customer complaint resolution rate for discrimination cases, 12%. Industry average, 67%. Your airline ranks dead last among major carriers for addressing bias incidents. Captain Mitchell looked physically ill. These weren't opinions or allegations. These were documented facts from a United Nations study. A businessman in 1B shook his head. 12%? That's criminal negligence. The financial reality check CEO Richardson's voice returned through the radio, noticeably strained. Dr. Williams, what can Delta do to address these concerns constructively? Terrence smiled slightly, the expression of someone holding all the cards. Let's discuss the financial implications first, Mr. Richardson. Delta's annual revenue, $47.3 billion. Your UN diplomatic contract, $280 million annually. Your federal diversity compliance rating directly impacts government contracts worth $1.2 billion over the next 5 years. The numbers were surgical in their precision. Every figure verifiable, every statistic devastating. Additionally, under Federal Aviation Regulation 382.7, discrimination against diplomatic passengers carries mandatory penalties of $75,000 per incident. Civil Rights Act violations in interstate commerce, $50,000 minimum fine per occurrence. Mark was quietly calculating. Jessica had stopped crying and started staring in horror. Current social media exposure, 24,000 live viewers, trending globally, picked up by major news outlets. Estimated brand damage based on similar incidents, $15 to $25 million in lost bookings over 6 months. A passenger muttered, 25 million? Jesus. The flight attendant from economy, Linda, had moved closer to hear. Her face showed the dawning realization of how catastrophic this had become. Stock price impact from discrimination scandals averages 3.7% decline in the first week, Terrence continued methodically. Delta's market cap, approximately $28 billion. That's over $1 billion in shareholder value at risk.
The legal ultimatum, Terrence closed the folder and looked directly at Captain Mitchell. Here's what happens next, Captain. Corporate counsel will arrive and attempt damage control. They'll offer compensation, apologies, policy reviews, standard crisis management. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But this incident has been documented in real time by thousands of witnesses. It will be presented to 47 nations tomorrow as a case study in systemic aviation discrimination. The evidence is irrefutable. The radio crackled. CEO Richardson's voice was tight. Dr. Williams, what are your requirements for resolution? My requirements are simple, Mr. Richardson. Immediate implementation of verifiable anti-discrimination measures. Not promises, not committees. Actual, measurable change. The live stream audience was completely engaged. Comments showed global support. Make them pay. Justice in real time. This is how change happens. The specific demands, Terrence outlined his terms with diplomatic precision. First, mandatory unconscious bias training for all customer-facing staff within 60 days. Not online modules, in-person, intensive training with testing requirements and failure consequences. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. Mark's jaw tightened. Second, implementation of anonymous discrimination reporting system accessible to passengers during flights. Reports go directly to federal oversight, bypassing internal review entirely. Several passengers nodded approvingly. Someone called out, "About time!" Third, monthly diversity audits of passenger interactions with results published publicly and reviewed by UN observers. Full transparency, no internal spin. Fourth, immediate suspension pending investigation for crew members involved in this incident. No paid leave, no internal protection, full accountability. The demands were specific, measurable, and publicly stated. No wiggle room for corporate lawyers. Fifth, personal apology from CEO Richardson within 24 hours, acknowledging systemic failures and committing to measurable reform with timeline specifics. A passenger in row 4 called out, "What about compensation?" Others murmured agreement. Terrence addressed the cabin. Individual compensation is secondary to systemic change. Money doesn't prevent the next incident. Policy changes do. The corporate capitulation. Silence stretched across the radio. Executives were clearly conferring off-air. The live stream audience held its collective breath. Comments pleaded, "Say yes. Don't let them weasel out. The world is watching." Finally, Richardson's voice returned. "Dr. Williams, we accept your requirements. Implementation begins immediately." The cabin erupted. Passengers applauded. Someone shouted, "Justice!" Another yelled, "Make it stick!" The live stream comments were celebratory. He did it. Accountability. Power of documentation. But Terrence wasn't finished. Mr. Richardson, accepting requirements and implementing them are different things. I'll need written confirmation of each measure, timeline for implementation, and third-party verification of progress. You'll have it within 4 hours, with specific metrics for success and failure consequences clearly defined. Agreed. Excellent. Now, regarding the crew members involved in this incident. The individual consequences. Terrence turned to face Jessica, Mark, and Dave directly. The cabin quieted, sensing the gravity of this moment. Martinez, your actions were captured on video viewed by thousands. You assumed I didn't belong in first class, refused to verify my credentials, accused me of fraud, and called security for removal. These actions violated federal law, airline policy, and basic human dignity. Jessica's tears returned, but Terrence's tone remained professional, almost gentle. Mr. Thompson, as supervisor, you enabled and escalated discrimination without due process. Your authority amplified the harm and created liability for your employer. Mr. Rodriguez, you threatened removal without cause and called for backup against a diplomatic passenger. Your security training should have included de-escalation, not escalation. Each statement was factual, measured, devastating.
Your employment status will be determined by federal investigators and airline management. My role is documentation and systemic change, not individual punishment. Dave finally spoke. Dr. Williams, we didn't know. Mr. Rodriguez, not knowing is exactly the problem. The system failed to prepare you for appropriate responses to diversity. That's what we're changing today. The systemic solution. But then Terrence's tone shifted slightly, from prosecutor to educator. However, individual consequences alone don't address systemic problems. This incident reflects training failures, policy gaps, and cultural issues that enabled bias to flourish unchecked. He looked around the cabin, addressing not just the crew, but the recording passengers and live stream audience. Real change requires acknowledging that discrimination isn't about individual prejudice. It's about systems that allow bias to operate without consequences. The live stream audience was absorbing every word. Comments reflected deep engagement. This is education. Systemic versus individual. Learning moment. Professor Diplomat. Every person watching this can help prevent future incidents by demanding accountability when they witness discrimination. Silence enables bias. Documentation creates change. A passenger called out, "What can we do practically?" Record incidents, report them formally, demand follow-up, share your experiences, support victims. Most importantly, don't accept "that's just how things are" as an answer. The Resolution Framework CEO Richardson's voice returned. Dr. Williams, our legal team is drafting implementation documents now. What additional oversight do you require? Monthly progress reports to the UN Human Rights Aviation Committee, quarterly reviews by federal diversity compliance officers, annual assessment by independent civil rights organizations. Agreed. Public posting of discrimination complaint statistics with resolution details and demographic breakdowns. Agreed. Zero tolerance policy for retaliation against employees who report bias incidents with whistleblower protections. Agreed. And establishment of a passenger advocacy board with authority to investigate complaints independently. Williams, that's significant oversight. Mr. Richardson, this incident reached 24,000 viewers in real time. The oversight matches the scope of the problem you've created. The systematic dismantling of discriminatory practices was happening in real time, broadcast to a global audience. The power of preparation. A passenger in 2D finally spoke up. Dr. Williams, how did you stay so calm through all this? Terrence smiled genuinely for the first time since boarding. Preparation meets opportunity. I've spent years documenting these exact patterns. Today's incident, unfortunately, was predictable based on our research data. He gestured to his portfolio. Every statistic I cited, every legal reference, every policy requirement. I carry this information because discrimination in aviation is systematic and well documented. The difference today was live documentation and immediate accountability. Usually these incidents happen without witnesses or fade into internal complaint systems that resolve nothing. But when discrimination happens in front of thousands of witnesses with international attention, suddenly change becomes possible. The transformation. The cabin atmosphere had completely transformed. Where tension and conflict once dominated, now there was something resembling respect, education, and hope. Even Jessica had stopped crying and was listening intently. Mark stood straighter, perhaps recognizing the magnitude of what he'd witnessed. Captain Mitchell keyed her radio. Operations, we're ready to proceed with departure once corporate resolution is complete. But everyone knew this flight would never be routine again. It had become a documented case study that would be presented to the United Nations, referenced in policy discussions, and remembered as a moment when preparation met discrimination and won decisively. The real showdown wasn't between individuals, it was between system and accountability. And accountability had won. Justice in real time. The corporate legal team arrived at Gate 27 within 43 minutes,
a record response time that spoke to the magnitude of the crisis. Through the aircraft windows, passengers watched 3 black SUVs discharge executives, lawyers, and crisis management specialists. CEO Michael Richardson himself appeared at the aircraft door, flanked by Delta's Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Patricia Williams, and General Counsel Robert Chen. The live stream audience, now exceeding 31,000 viewers, watched the unprecedented sight of corporate leadership boarding a delayed flight for damage control. Richardson approached Terrence directly, extending his hand. "Dr. Williams, I'm Michael Richardson. I apologize for the unacceptable treatment you've experienced." Terrence accepted the handshake with diplomatic grace. "Mr. Richardson, apologies are noted. Implementation of changes matters more than expressions of regret." The live stream comments exploded. "CEO on the plane. This is historic. Real accountability happening." Immediate fallout. Within the next hour, the consequences unfolded with corporate precision. Jessica Martinez was suspended without pay pending federal investigation. Her employee ID was deactivated before the corporate team left the aircraft. Security escorted her from the premises as passengers watched through terminal windows. Mark Thompson received immediate demotion from supervisor to ground crew, pending bias training completion and psychological evaluation. His management authority was revoked permanently. Dave Rodriguez was reassigned to administrative duties with mandatory retraining in discrimination law and de-escalation procedures. Captain Mitchell received a formal reprimand and mandatory diversity training, but retained her position due to her eventual cooperation in resolving the incident. The live stream audience witnessed corporate accountability in real time. Comments reflected satisfaction. Swift justice. Finally, some consequences. This is how change happens. Systemic changes implemented. But individual consequences were only the beginning. Richardson announced immediate policy changes that would transform Delta's operations. Effective immediately, Delta is implementing the most comprehensive anti-discrimination training program in aviation history. Every customer-facing employee, 24,000 people, will complete intensive bias recognition training within 60 days. Dr. Patricia Williams stepped forward with specific details. The program includes scenario-based training using real discrimination cases, including today's incident. Employees who fail training requirements will face termination. The live stream audience was documenting every commitment. These weren't internal promises. They were public statements made before thousands of witnesses. "We're also launching the Dignity in Flight reporting system," Richardson continued. "Passengers can report discrimination incidents directly to federal oversight through seatback screens, mobile apps, or anonymous hotlines." A passenger called out, "What about retaliation against employees who report problems?" "Zero tolerance, Doctor," Williams responded firmly. "We're establishing a $2 million whistleblower protection fund, an independent ombudsman office. Any retaliation results in immediate termination and personal legal liability." The monitoring revolution. Perhaps most significantly, Delta agreed to unprecedented transparency measures. Monthly discrimination statistics would be published online with demographic breakdowns, resolution details, and trend analysis. No corporate spin, no buried data, full transparency. UN observers would conduct quarterly reviews of passenger interactions with authority to interview staff and passengers independently. An external civil rights organization would perform annual audits of company culture, hiring practices, and policy implementation. These aren't temporary measures, Richardson emphasized. This represents a fundamental transformation of how Delta approaches diversity and inclusion. Terrence nodded approvingly. Transparency creates accountability. Accountability prevents future incidents. The intellectual victory. What made this resolution remarkable wasn't the money involved. No financial settlement was discussed. Instead, Terrence had leveraged documentation and preparation to force systemic change. "Dr. Williams could have demanded millions in compensation," observed a passenger.
Instead, he chose policy changes that will protect thousands of future passengers. The live stream comments reflected understanding. This is bigger than money. System change over personal gain. Real leadership. Terrence addressed this directly. Individual compensation addresses past harm. Policy changes prevent future harm. The choice was obvious. His diplomatic training showed in every response, focused on solutions rather than revenge, systems rather than individuals. Global impact model. Other airlines were already responding. American Airlines announced an immediate review of their discrimination policies. United Airlines committed to adopting similar transparency measures. JetBlue pledged to implement passenger advocacy boards. The incident was creating industry-wide transformation in real time. This case will be presented to the UN tomorrow, Terrence noted, but its impact is already global. Other airlines are implementing changes to avoid similar incidents. Richardson added, "We hope Delta's response becomes the industry standard for addressing discrimination. No airline should wait for a crisis to do the right thing." The documentation legacy. The live stream had captured everything, from initial discrimination to corporate accountability. The video evidence was already being analyzed by civil rights organizations, legal scholars, and policy experts. "This is the most thoroughly documented discrimination case in aviation history," commented Dr. Williams. "The real-time nature makes denial impossible and accountability immediate." The footage would be used in training programs, legal precedents, and policy discussions for years to come. Personal transformation. Even the crew members involved showed signs of genuine learning. Jessica, before leaving the aircraft, approached Terrence quietly. "Dr. Williams, I know my apology can't undo what I did, but I want you to know. I see it now. I understand what happened and why it was wrong." Terrence's response was measured but kind. "Understanding is the first step toward change, Ms. Martinez. Use this experience to help others recognize their own biases." Mark Thompson similarly acknowledged his role. "I enabled this situation by not questioning assumptions. That stops today." The ripple effect. Within hours, the incident had sparked conversations far beyond aviation. Universities scheduled discrimination workshops. Corporations reviewed their bias training programs. Social media buzzed with personal stories of discrimination and solidarity. The hashtag #HatDocumentDiscrimination began trending, encouraging people to record and report bias incidents across all industries. "One incident on one flight," Terrence observed, "has created a movement for accountability everywhere." That's the power of documentation and immediate response. The transformation was complete. From discrimination to accountability, from individual harm to systemic change, from corporate damage control to industry leadership. Real reform had happened in real time, witnessed by the world. The ripple effect of standing firm. 6 months later, Dr. Terrence Williams received a letter that would have seemed impossible on that tense afternoon aboard Delta Flight 447. "Dear Dr. Williams," it began, "thanks to the policy changes implemented after our encounter, I want to report that discrimination incidents on Delta flights have decreased by 73%. More importantly, passenger confidence in reporting bias has increased by 340%. Your quiet revolution worked." The letter was signed by Jessica Martinez, now working as a diversity trainer, using her own experience to help others recognize unconscious bias. The UN presentation that Dr. Williams delivered the next day became the foundation for the International Aviation Equality Accord, adopted by 47 nations. The Delta model of real-time accountability and transparency had become the global standard. These touching stories of transformation demonstrate how individual courage can create systemic change. Real-life stories like Dr. Williams prove that preparation, documentation, and dignified resistance can move mountains, or in this case, move entire industries toward justice. Personal legacy. Dr. Williams never sought the spotlight, but his diplomatic approach to discrimination had created lasting change. He continued chairing the UN Human Rights Aviation Committee, now with unprecedented authority and resources. The goal was never punishment, he reflected in a later interview. The goal was prevention. We wanted to make sure no other passenger would face what I faced that day. His portfolio, the same leather briefcase that contained the evidence that changed everything, now included thank you letters from passengers who'd been treated with dignity because of policy changes implemented that day. The black stories emerging from this incident weren't just about discrimination faced, but about quiet power wielded responsibly, about choosing education over retaliation, about transforming systems instead of merely fighting symptoms. Social impact, the hashtag Document Discrimination movement had evolved into a global accountability network. Over 2,400 bias incidents had been reported and resolved using the documentation methods pioneered during Flight 447. Universities taught the Williams method in conflict resolution courses. The combination of preparation, real-time documentation, and systematic response had become a model for addressing discrimination across industries. Life stories like this one reminded people that change happens when individuals refuse to accept unacceptable treatment, and when they channel that resistance into systemic transformation rather than personal revenge. The ongoing revolution. Airlines worldwide had adopted similar transparency measures. Discrimination complaints were resolved at rates exceeding 85% industry-wide. Training programs modeled on Delta's post-incident response had become mandatory across major carriers. But perhaps most importantly, the incident had shifted cultural expectations. Passengers now expected accountability. Employees understood that bias had consequences. Corporations knew that discrimination created not just legal liability, but immediate public accountability. Real power, Dr. Williams had said that day, isn't about getting even. It's about making sure it never happens to anyone else. That principle had guided every decision, every policy change, every moment of that remarkable afternoon when preparation met discrimination and chose transformation over retaliation. Your voice matters. If you've witnessed or experienced discrimination, your story matters. Share it in the comments below. Your voice can be part of the solution. Document incidents when you see them. Support victims when you encounter bias. Demand accountability from institutions when they fall short. Subscribe to Black Soul Stories for more accounts of quiet courage changing the world. Hit the notification bell to join our community of people committed to justice through dignity, preparation, and persistent advocacy. Remember, sometimes the most powerful revolution happens when we refuse to accept the unacceptable and transform systems instead of just fighting symptoms. Your story could be the next one that changes everything.
Behind every headline is a human story. At Beat Stories, we go deeper, where emotion meets evidence and drama reveals the system. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come.